Stop and think with me. First of all, do you really believe that extreme wealth happens by chance? If your answer is yes, you are mistaken. If it is no, then you are already beginning to wake up to the path of truth. No empire is built on the winds of chance. What does exist is a brutal sequence of radical, courageous, meticulously calculated decisions that transform a simple worker into one of the richest men in human history. And today, I'm going to open up the real vault of my decisions to you. The 5 decisions that not only lifted me out of poverty in Scotland, but paved the way for me to dominate the steel industry and become the richest man in the world in my time. But first, I want to give you a warning. If you are one of those who seek quick shortcuts, easy wealth, results without sacrifice, this is not the video for you. Here I speak to those willing to pay the price of true greatness. Now, while you reflect, take advantage and subscribe to this channel. Each lesson here is a direct investment in building your own empire. And remember, those who procrastinate, learning, postpone their own fortune. Let's move on to the first decision. The first radical decision I made was the most difficult of all: to choose absolute focus on a single business. When I started out, I could have done what many do: diversify. Too early. Buy properties, try to open multiple businesses, flirt with various industries. But I understood early on a non-negotiable principle. The man who wants to be truly great must first be an absolute master of a single arena. I chose steel. I didn't choose it because it was fashionable. I chose it because I saw in it the backbone of a world that was being built with iron and fire. Bridges, railroads, ships, skyscrapers, everything pulsed with the strength of steel. And I decided that I would be the lord of that metallic heart. There was no room for distractions. I sold my interests in oil. I turned down tempting offers in real estate. I rejected investments that could have brought me quick gains but would have diverted me from my central axis. This decision was like digging a single well, deep enough to reach the purest and most abundant waters. Those who try to dig dozens of wells at the same time never reach sufficient depth in any of them. Most fail because they get lost in the multitude. They want to be everything and end up being nothing. Now listen carefully. Focus is not an option. It is brutal discipline. And it was this discipline that allowed me to make the second radical decision, even more dangerous: to control the entire production chain. When I understood that the strength of steel lay in its scale, I made the decision not to depend on third parties. I would not buy iron ore from others, nor coal from others, nor transportation from others. I would be the owner of every link in the chain. While others bought raw materials on the open market, I acquired mines. While they paid fortunes for rail transport, I built and bought railroads. While they negotiated high prices with power plants, I produced the necessary fuel myself. Total control means total risk and total return. This decision was not a mere whim for control. It was a strategic architecture. I eliminated middlemen, reduced costs, ensured quality, and above all shielded my empire from blackmail and external crises. Many called it recklessness. Few understood that absolute control reduces uncertainty. When you control all the variables you can, the unpredictable becomes manageable. This vision led me to what was perhaps the third most decisive decision of my career: to bring together men better than me. Listen to me carefully now, because here lies one of the greatest secrets to building wealth at any time, including your own. You will not get rich by your own hands. You will get rich by the hands of men better than you. My talent was not in operating blast furnaces. It was not in designing machines. My true gift was identifying men whose technical genius surpassed mine and giving them the ideal conditions to flourish. Charles Schwab, for example, my young prodigy, possessed extraordinary organizational intelligence. I gave him autonomy, resources, and recognition. In return, he brought me efficiency, expansion, and huge profits. I didn't hire friends. I didn't hire based on cronyism. I hired the best. Always. This is a painful decision for many, because the human ego fears being surrounded by superiors. I did the opposite. My pride was in knowing that my team had skills that I never possessed, and that was exactly why the empire grew. The weak seek servants. The strong seek giants. Surrounding yourself with mediocrity is to decree the stagnation of your own kingdom. Now pay close attention, because we are coming to the fourth decision, the one that definitively separates the amateur from the empire builder. Reinvest, reinvest, reinvest. For years, I took very little from the company's profits. While others built mansions, bought yachts, and flaunted jewelry, I kept my life simple and reinvested every dollar possible in expanding the business. The accumulated capital was not to be kept under the mattress out of fear, but planted again as seed for new harvests. That's how I built new factories, bought competitors, invested in cutting-edge technology, and increased my production capacity year after year. The power of compound reinvestment creates an upward spiral that is almost impossible to achieve for those who reap the fruits of their labor too soon. And finally, we come to the fifth and final radical decision, the one that sealed not only my fortune, but also my legacy in history, to transform wealth into a social mission. You may imagine that the pinnacle of wealth is to accumulate mountains of gold. It is not. The true pinnacle is to use the accumulated gold as an instrument of lasting transformation. I built libraries, universities, research centers. I did not distribute handouts. I built foundations of knowledge so that entire generations could build their own empires. As I have already revealed and repeat before you now, the man who dies rich dies miserable. It is not about accumulating for the sake of accumulating. It is about accumulating with purpose. It is about governing wealth with the same discipline with which one governs a company. And now I ask you, my apprentice, are you willing to make your 5 radical choices? If so, stay here with me, because I still have much more to teach you. Now that you know the 5 decisions that paved the way for my empire, it's time to delve even deeper into the essence behind each one. Because great decisions are not born in a vacuum. They are forged in the mind, in the fire of vision, and above all, in unbreakable discipline. Many young entrepreneurs, businessmen, and women relentlessly seek formulas for success. They read books, attend lectures, listen to modern gurus, but the truth is that very few understand what really drives the wheels of true wealth: absolute self-control. I discovered early on that I could not rule an industry until I ruled myself. Emotional control, rational coolness, absence of impulsiveness. This was the hidden foundation behind each of those radical decisions I mentioned. Do you think it was easy to choose steel and ignore other opportunities? It was a sacrifice. Every new industry that emerged was a temptation. But I learned to resist the lure of quick profits. I focused on steel until I knew every detail, every millimeter, every market fluctuation. I became an absolute expert in my field. That's what modern dreamers lack. They throw themselves into multiple projects with little or no real knowledge, guided by the fleeting glimmer of opportunity. They forget that true mastery comes from the patience of those who dig deep, not from those who jump from hole to hole. And when I took full control of the production chain, I had to take risks that would make many men falter. Imagine having thousands of men under your command, tons of ore being extracted daily, your own rail transport, power plants built with your capital. Those who cannot govern themselves succumb to the weight of such responsibility. Crises arose, steel prices fluctuated, strikes and political pressures threatened stability. But I kept my eyes fixed on the bigger picture. A captain who panics in the first storm will never cross the ocean. And when I decided to gather men better than myself, I faced another kind of challenge. The challenge of ego. Most people fear surrounding themselves with people who are smarter, more talented, more brilliant. They fear being overshadowed. They fear losing control. Nonsense. I understood that the brighter my men were, the more unshakable the empire would be. While others hired sycophants, I recruited titans. Charles Schwab was one of those men. Young, visionary, a born production engineer. I gave him operational command because I knew his talent would multiply profits far beyond what my own technical knowledge could achieve. That is the supreme role of a true leader, to build thrones where others build fences. But here, my apprentice, we enter an even more sensitive area: reinvestment. There is nothing more difficult for the average person than giving up immediate pleasures. When profits began to flow, I could have succumbed to vanity, mansions, parties, endless trips, public ostentation. But I resisted. My only luxury was the expansion of the wealth machine itself. Every dollar returned as fertile seed to the land. While my competitors withdrew their profits, I expanded factories, modernized equipment, and acquired faltering competitors. They burned out in a few years. I continued to grow in a continuous spiral. Constant reinvestment created an effect that few understand: the power of compounding. Each year my production capacity doubled. My unit costs fell, my profits multiplied. I did not grow linearly, I grew exponentially, and it was through this discipline that I reached the pinnacle, transforming wealth into a mission. You see, I could have died with my fortune untouched, accumulating sums that would impress even the most greedy. But what would have been my legacy? A name carved in stone, but erased from the memory of the people. Instead, I built libraries. I erected universities, financed research centers. My money served to enlighten minds, not to feed addictions. And with that, I perpetuated my name not as the man who accumulated, but as the man who built. Accumulated wealth is a mountain of sand. Applied wealth is a column of marble. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is one of the greatest secrets of wealth. Capital is only a means. The true empire is built on the invisible, on the mind, on discipline, on vision, and on a higher mission. You can replicate my 5 radical decisions in any era, in any industry, in any social context. They are universal laws of success, but to do so you must first decide to govern yourself, and you, my apprentice. Are you ready for the next level of this mentorship? Now, as you move forward with me, we begin to leave the realm of lessons and enter the true anatomy of empire building. Because many have heard of my decisions, very few, however, have understood the underground forces that underpinned each one. The modern world is enchanted by the external glitz of wealth. Mansions, luxury cars, exuberant figures in the news. All of this is nothing but foam on the ocean. I, however, have always been concerned with the invisible foundation, with the foundations that support the monstrous weight of a solid, durable, and indestructible fortune. This foundation is composed of 5 internal layers that have sustained my radical decisions, and it is these 5 invisible layers that I now want to open your eyes to. The first layer is called defined purpose. No man has ever built a legitimate and lasting fortune without first defining, with absolute clarity, his why. From the beginning, my mind was fixed on a single idea: to build something greater than my own existence. I wasn't just looking for profit's sake. I wanted to build structures, generate progress, be a living cog in the advancement of civilization. Steel was not the end. Steel was the vehicle. This is where 99% of men fail. They start businesses with a focus on money rather than purpose. And because money is volatile, their businesses also become volatile. Purpose is the reinforced concrete foundation that supports the building even in the worst storms. When you wake up every morning with a non-negotiable why, work ceases to be an effort and becomes a mission. It was this purpose that kept me going during economic crises, strikes, attacks from competitors, and public criticism. The second layer is called progressive growth mindset. Understand this well. There is no genuine wealth without constant expansion. Stagnation is the death knell of any enterprise. I never allowed my organization to stand still. There was always something to improve, optimize, expand. When a process reached maximum efficiency, we created an even better one. When a market was saturated, we opened up new geographies, new production lines, new standards of excellence. This mindset of continuous growth is a mental discipline. Mediocrity, my apprentice, is born the moment a person settles. When someone said to me, "That's enough, Carnegie, enjoy what you've achieved," I heard the echo of death whispering. An empire lives by constantly recreating itself. The third layer of the invisible foundation is selection of superior alliances. Never confuse loyalty with complacency. I didn't need sycophants. I needed gladiators. Men capable of challenging me with intelligence, presenting superior solutions, carrying the weight of leadership with honor and competence. At each stage of growth, I surrounded myself with the brightest minds. I delegated not to those who begged for positions, but to those who delivered results. Schwab, Frick, Phipps. Each of them was a strategic piece, precisely placed on the board of expansion. Wisdom lies in understanding that you will never command everything, but you can and must command those who command. That is the essence of true leadership. The fourth layer is even rarer: simplicity of life with complexity of business. While the empire became a financial colossus, my personal life remained deliberately simple. I lived comfortably, but without ostentation. My personal expenses were never a proportional reflection of the business's profits. This discipline of moderation prevented vanity from corrupting my judgment. Every dollar saved on personal luxury was a dollar more reinvested in strengthening the business model. And consider the fatal mistake of the nouveau riche. At the first whiff of fortune, they inflate their personal lives with empty ostentation. They become slaves to their own consumption. I did the opposite. My complexity was in my business, not at my dinner table. And the fifth layer, the highest, is a philanthropic vision as a final mission. My empire was not just a private end. I always understood that the accumulation of wealth came with a moral duty, to give back to the world, not in fragile charity, but in the foundations of education, culture, and social advancement. That is why I built libraries. That is why I founded universities. That is why I invested in research centers. Not to ease consciences, but to prepare minds, develop talent, and multiply opportunities. That was my greatest victory, transforming the fruit of steel into a lasting intellectual legacy. Now understand, my apprentice, what this means for you. The modern world is full of opportunities. Today's technologies allow any determined man to build fortunes that in my day took decades. But the principles are the same. They are universal. They are eternal. If you master these 5 invisible layers and anchor them under your 5 radical decisions, you can build an empire. It doesn't matter if it's in steel, technology, medicine, or education. The terrain may change. The mental mechanism remains. You followed me this far. Now it's time to dive even deeper into the mental and emotional traps that destroy 99% of those who attempt this journey. Now let's cross the most dangerous layer of this journey, the internal enemies of the empire. Because, you see, my apprentice, it's not competitors that destroy most empires. It is not economic crises, nor governments, nor wars. What destroys an empire is born within the mind and heart of its own founder. It is the invisible traps of the undisciplined mind. And I have known each one of them. I have faced them. I have mastered them. Now, I pass them on to you so that you may identify them before they contaminate your work. The first trap is the illusion of haste. How many men have I seen shipwrecked because they wanted to artificially accelerate their results? They plant today and want to harvest tomorrow. Solid businesses do not flourish in weeks. They require deep roots, solid foundations, and well-calibrated gears. It took me decades to build my supremacy in steel, years of reinvestment, surgical negotiations, progressive expansion. Each new factory was opened when the previous one was already operating at maximum efficiency. Hasty capital dies in the first storm. Remember, the rush for quick profits turns entrepreneurs into roulette players. And in roulette, the house always wins. The second trap is vanity disguised as ambition. In the beginning, ambition is the driving force, but at a certain point, legitimate ambition can be replaced by pure vanity. And when that happens, the empire begins to rot from within. Vain men begin to make decisions to impress others, not to strengthen the business. They build monumental headquarters, buy unnecessary luxuries, promote themselves in magazines and banquets, while the fundamentals of the operation deteriorate. I have never allowed the desire for applause to guide my steps. True greatness does not need the spotlight. It imposes itself silently through the strength of its results. The third trap is the numbing comfort. Few can resist the siren song of comfort. After a certain achievement, many leaders relax. They rely too much on established systems. They stop reviewing processes, challenging the team, innovating products. They become hostages to their own past success. Empires die in the comfort zone. I, on the other hand, have maintained a permanent state of strategic restlessness. Even in the most profitable years, I always sought new efficiencies, new markets, new alliances. I never allowed myself to believe that what was already excellent could not be even better. The fourth trap is the confusion between delegating and abdicating. Delegating is necessary. I myself delegated operations to men like Schwab. But strategic oversight can never be abandoned. When the commander fails to periodically review each front of his army, failures multiply in the shadows. I knew every financial detail of my companies. I received detailed reports. I intervened when necessary. I had eyes and ears within each operation. Intelligent delegation requires trust, but it does not dispense with vigilance. And the fifth trap, the most treacherous of all, is fear disguised as prudence. After amassing a fortune, many become dominated by the fear of losing it. They become overly conservative. They paralyze investment, reject innovation, and avoid calculated risks. This fear breeds stagnation, and stagnation, as I have already told you, is the death knell of empire. I have never feared reinvestment. I have never feared modernization. I have never feared acquiring competitors. My empire grew precisely because I understood that true prudence is not the avoidance of risk. It is the careful calculation of risk. Now understand this. These 5 traps are universal. They attacked men in my time. They continue to destroy men in yours, and they will be present in every generation. But there is a powerful antidote to all of them: the construction of a governing mind. The governing mind is one that masters emotions, controls impulses, questions vanities, analyzes numbers coldly, and keeps its eyes fixed on the higher vision. I formed my mind this way: daily reading, constant reflection, dialogue with wise men, systematic review of my own mistakes. I cultivated my mind as a general prepares his army before war. If you want solid wealth and lasting empires, you will need to build this mind. Because the real battlefield of wealth is not in the markets. It is here, within you, in your ability to govern yourself. Now that you know the invisible enemies, let's move on to an even deeper level. The secret principles that allowed me to master the game of brutal competition without ever losing the spirit of building. Now, my apprentice, let's enter the heart of the battle where many have lost their fortunes, their reputations, and worse, their souls. The brutal game of competition. Competition is the stage where the weak perish and the strong thrive. And no, I'm not talking about vulgar competition, made up of dirty tricks and gratuitous destruction. That is the tactic of the small. I played on a different board, the board of constructive supremacy. Do you want to know how I overcame titans? How I annihilated competitors and still left an unblemished legacy? I will now tell you the 4 secret principles that governed my combat strategy. Principles that remain invisible to the eyes of most people even today. The first principle is to create structural superiority, not price wars. Mediocre people attack by lowering prices. They start trade wars that erode margins, exhaust resources, and drag everyone down to ruin. I never fell into that trap. My focus has always been structural, by dominating every step of the chain, from mines to railroads, from blast furnaces to ports. My production costs were naturally lower. While my competitors bled in price wars, I made healthy profits even selling below them. Not because I accepted tight margins, but because my structure was unshakably efficient. True competitive power lies not in the final price, but in the invisible cost of production. The second principle is to attack for growth, not destruction. Instead of trying to crush small competitors with frontal assaults, I acquired them. I incorporated their operations, absorbed their best talent, refined their processes. I didn't destroy wealth. I expanded the empire. Expansion through acquisition was my sharp sword. When a competitor stagnated, I brought them into my system. Their customers became my customers. Their employees became my soldiers. So while others competed in war, I expanded my business sovereignty. The third principle is to use technology as a silent weapon. While many saw innovations as just additional expenses, I saw them for what they really were: multipliers of competitive advantage. I was one of the first to adopt the Bessemer process in steel production, a revolution in cost reduction and quality improvement. While others were still debating whether the investment was worthwhile, I had already taken the technological lead. Technology isn't just for modernization. It creates invisible barriers against competition. When your operation produces faster, with higher quality and at lower cost, your competitors simply can't match your efficiency. Every technological advance I adopted was a hammer blow to the wall that isolated my leadership. The fourth principle, the most powerful and least understood, is to cultivate long-term strategic relationships. Business isn't just cold numbers. It's human alliances, trusting partnerships, solid relationships with banks, governments, suppliers, carriers, and distribution channels. I built a network of loyal allies, men and institutions that grew with me, benefiting from my success while strengthening my empire. Many of my rivals treated suppliers as disposable, banks as mere financiers, governments as obstacles. I saw them as key pieces in the bigger game. In business, loyalty cultivated over time is armor against future storms. Now see, my apprentice, why so many fail in the game of competition. Because they fight on the surface while the real war rages, in the invisible depths. They want to win by brute force, when they should win by systemic superiority. That is why the overwhelming majority of the newly rich disappear within a few decades, while my empire has spanned generations. Sustained not by luck, but by long-term strategic engineering. And you, who listen to me, need to engrave this deeply. Solid wealth is not the result of explosions, but of well-adjusted gears that turn steadily and progressively. Now you are beginning to see through my eyes, but there is still one step above. So far, we have talked about decisions, mental foundations, pitfalls, and strategic combat. Now, in the next block, I will lead you to the pinnacle of the game. How to transform your fortune not only into wealth, but into an immortal legacy. Now, my apprentice, we have reached the summit of the mountain, because most men believe that the pinnacle of wealth lies in the accumulation of money, property, and possessions. They die surrounded by goods but leave behind only emptiness. The true glory, the true supreme triumph of wealth, is not in possessing, but in perpetuating. It is not in dying surrounded by gold, but in living surrounded by purpose. Here I reveal to you the last and greatest lesson of this journey, how to turn fortune into legacy. I learned early on that money, in and of itself, is a sterile instrument. It has the power to build or destroy, depending on the hands that wield it. And when the owner of fortune relinquishes control over its application, money inevitably degenerates. That is why I made the most radical decision of my life, to dedicate my life to structured philanthropy while still alive. Many of my contemporaries left colossal fortunes in their wills. I watched them with compassion. They waited to die to give, but I knew that once I was dead, I would no longer have the power to oversee the fate of my wealth. Alive, I was the conductor of its application. Thus, while still actively engaged in business, I began building libraries, universities, and research centers. I built more than 2,500 public libraries, democratizing access to knowledge at a time when knowledge was the privilege of the wealthy. I did not give alms. I did not distribute coins on the streets. That does not educate, empower, or transform. Instead, I offered tools so that men and women could build their own ascension. True philanthropy is not giving fish. It is building fishing schools. Wealth should not be a locked safe. It should be a flowing river, irrigating the fertile lands of human talent. But mind you, this was not an act of sentimental charity. It was a profound moral strategy. I knew that just as the expansion of my business depended on the training of brilliant minds, the future of civilization depended on the multiplication of knowledge. This is the highest form of leadership. Preparing the ground so that others can go even further than you have gone. My apprentice, I want you to understand what few have understood about me. My fortune was never my true treasure. My true treasure was the lasting impact I was able to make through it. And here I leave you with a powerful warning. The money you accumulate will have two inevitable destinations. It will either strengthen the world or make it sick. It will depend solely on your vision. The man who dies rich with his gold untouched dies miserable. I preferred to die with the knowledge that I had planted forests that would continue to grow long after my departure. Now look, this whole philosophy of legacy is really the logical consequence of the 5 radical decisions I have revealed to you throughout our journey. Because I chose absolute concentration. I built a solid capital generating machine. Because I controlled the entire production chain. I ensured the stability of my wealth. Because I gathered men better than myself. I multiplied the operational capacity of my empire. Because I reinvested. Continuously, I expanded the resource base available for philanthropy. And because I saw wealth as a mission, I turned every dollar into a brick of social progress. That is the complete machinery of the empire. A mental, emotional, strategic, and moral structure. Now, my apprentice, we have reached the end of our mentoring session, and I want to leave you not with advice, but with a call to responsibility. You now know the map. The knowledge is in your hands. Now it is your turn to build your empire with wisdom. Sign up and share this video with anyone who wants to build something great.